the union was formed in 1872, and it was the first seamen's union in the world, the Seamen's Union to Australia. They were probably the most repressed people on board ships. You had people down below shoveling coal. You went to see the world, and when you saw it, my first visit was to Durban, and when you saw how black people were treated and the inequality of man, it hardened my life anyhow, and I think it hardens everybody else.
Well, the veterans are really the heart and soul of the joint. When you look at the history of this union, it was built on the backs of working men and women, mostly men.
Stowed and slung by Australia's 24,000 waterside workers.
When I first joined the trade union movement in 1956-57, there were more of us. When I joined the Waterfront in 1962, there were more wharfies. There were 6,000 wharfies. Now 6,000. So we had it a bit easier than the young people today.
Seems beset by conflict.
I came to sea in June 1963, and I started in Newcastle, and I was a bit over 17 and a half. There were times when ships were laid up in dispute for quite some time, when crews were all fined, logged as we call them, and that was my first initiation into the struggle.
Born from struggles of the past.
And they decided to set up a veterans organisation to be there in support of the union at that period of time. We just won permanency, and prior to that, people were working on the B board, and they were working into their 70s, their 80s, and sometimes into their early 90s, because there was no pension.
We wanted them in as part of the political debate. We wanted to know what they thought. We wanted them to be involved in our international campaigning. We wanted them to reach out to other working men and women and continue the class struggle that they'd been living the whole of their life, but also to enjoy and relax, but mostly to get the acknowledgement they deserve.
On November 15th, 1938, less than 200 men at the Port Kembla wharves south of Sydney refused to load scrap iron on one ship, the Dolphin. They protested that the pig iron was...
So you're familiar with the Dolphin dispute?
Yeah, that's how Pig Iron Bob got his name.
This chapter in Australian history will be remembered forever by a nickname.
I'm working in Darwin now. We're still digging up pieces of stuff left on the bottom of Darwin Harbour from when the Japanese bombed Darwin. At least this load didn't go there.
It was mere waterside workers determining Australian foreign policy. And this infuriated, if you want, the boss class.
Fred and I are constantly in demand to go down to the school at St George's Basin to give the history of the wharfies and the seamen and vice versa. Why we're given the history is because if you don't know your history, then you don't know where you're going to go into the future. Why do we get into the international field? Why do we support South African people against apartheid? Why do we support the Cuban people? Why do we oppose the war in Vietnam? Because the same thing that was happening in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s and the 80s, happening in the 2010s and 15s.
When we had blues on board ships or on the wharves that you had them, in the Vietnam era, they were wonderful campaigns. We went out on the streets. We're out there. We talked to the public. We talked to the communities. We talked to pension groups. We talked to young groups. We've got to talk to the young as well as the old to be able to make that work. I always do my storytelling in a way that it's easy to understand. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful way of mixing, of engaging. The younger people have got a different language sometimes in some areas to us, older people. But when you sit and you eat and you listen and they asked, you're able to engage in a way that you haven't done in the past, because you're learning too about the way that they experience and motivate each other in the struggles that they're part of.
The people that had the great rewards from that hard work and leadership are the current generation of seafarers and maritime workers and wharfies in this country. And we've got a responsibility as we move through our generational change to do the same thing.
Control both sides, Simon.
A 98 Patrick's dispute. I mean, that'll always be, whether you're a seaman or whether you're a person that never went to sea, it's well recognised. Hunter number 1 was another courageous fight. What happened was we marched down there and gave them solidarity. And then you had the Gunnedah. It was the Seamen's Union that stopped that strike up there, that sit in for 42 days down in the mine, because Laurie Steen held the Miller ships up. It was Miller's Mines. We supported the Boeing workers for 5 long months. The vets used to go every weekend, and it was a win. And you know who was the one that brought it to fruition? Paddy Crumlin, because he said to Shortland, you're in the ITF, now get yourself over to Seattle and get support from them. There was a great win.
It was in the early 60s and 70s and 80s, if there was an issue where we were losing jobs and people were attempting to take things off us, we'd take action. Now the laws today don't allow that. And so we can't bring the men off the job like we used to, and so the veterans are there to go and help and assist by going to the demonstrations and being part of the demonstration on behalf of the members that can't get there.
Fifth day, retired unionists and dock workers from Newcastle and Port Kembla joined today's picket.
There's been so many demonstrations in the last few years by virtue of what the government and the previous governments have been attempting to do to the Maritime Union of Australia, and that is to bring in labour, cheap labour, to take our jobs. Everywhere you look, jobs are being lost day by day by day.
That solidarity has won us the greatest conditions of employment that the world has seen.
I engage all the time with the young people because they're our future. You cannot keep talking about negativity. You must talk about an outcome, a positive way. It's about what you're aiming for.
The real leadership are the ordinary working men and women, retirees, people that have contributed, people that don't ask for anything, that are humble, but will still turn up to the monthly meeting, that still want to be part of the struggle because they've based their whole life on it. Now, if that's not an inspiration and that's not a union, then I'm not here. That is our union. That's the future of unionism: inclusion, community, cooperation, respect and courage.
The wharfies went down to the ships to put their case to the seamen.
It's been a wonderful experience. It's been hard. It's been hard on the families. But let me just say this, within the struggles, everything I've got belonged to the union.
Prevent the government and the ship owners from smashing our union. Be on guard against lies in the newspapers. Hear our side of the case.